Now, when it comes to setting preferences in Illustrator, most of them are really set as they need to be, and I'm not going to advise you to go in here and change a bunch of things, but there's just a few that I would like to take a look at and show you why we might adjust those. Now, to choose the preferences, on the Mac we can come up here to the Illustrator menu and go down and choose preferences. On the PC you can look under the Edit menu, however both of them can be accessed by a shortcut. Command K on the Mac or Control K on the PC, and that will bring up your preferences dialog box. Now, the first thing I want to show you inside the general area is what's called the keyboard increment. Now, when we're adjusting the position of elements on the screen, which we'll do later, this is called nudging. It allows you to select an object and use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move it slightly up, down, left, or right, depending on which key you hit. And this value here is how much it will move by, okay? So this is dependent really on what you're doing. If you're working in an RGB document on, say, a website design and you're using something called Pixel Preview where everything aligns to a pixel grid, then you want to make sure that this isn't set to, say, half a pixel or something, because then you lose your aliased edges, everything gets slightly fuzzy. So this will vary. So it's worth remembering our keyboard shortcut to pull up the preferences, and then you can go in and select whichever value is needed at the specific time, okay? So I just wanted to point that one out. I'll leave it as it is for now, but it's something we can change in future. Now, if we come over here to the general options, let's go down and take a quick look at the type. And what I would say under here is let's go ahead and turn font preview off. Now, depends really on how many fonts you have open, but let's say you don't use a font utility like Suitcase or something, and you may have a couple of hundred fonts in your system. As soon as you go to the type menu and view the typefaces, all of them are going to preview as if they're actually being viewed or printed, so you see them in their true form rather than just the name of the font. Sometimes that can bog the system down a little bit, and in my experience, I just like to have this option turned off, okay? So just for my own peace of mind, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, all right? Now, one option here which is never selected is the type object selection by path only. Usually when we generate a single line of type, it's created with like a single selection line underneath it, and the way that Illustrator used to work is you could only grab type and move it around the page if you selected this line, which is basically the baseline of the type. Well, that's now changed in that you can click pretty much anywhere on the type and it will be selected, and then you can drag it around. But sometimes, again in my experience, it tends to become frustrating. If you have graphic elements positioned very close to that type, you can't select them because the type is the sort of the default area that becomes selectable. So sometimes, again, it's worth coming back in here, sometimes you might want to go ahead and say type object selection by the path only. That means you can only pick up the baseline to move it around. Again, I'll leave it turned off, but you know where it is if we have to come back to it, okay? Now, under the next option, under units, I'm going to specify here my own personal preference, which is millimeters. And to be honest, for the artwork that we're using in this training series, these are European documents, so we're going to be specifying things in millimeters, but here's the cool thing. It doesn't really matter which measurement system you're comfortable with. Obviously, the North American market is going to be in inches. Some people still work in points and picas, and you can really specify anything you want, because in any of the dialog boxes in Illustrator, and to be honest, most Adobe programs from what I know, you can key in any value and it will automatically convert that to whichever unit is actually specified in the preferences. So let's say I do specify mine in millimeters and you do yours in inches. If I tell you to key in 10 millimeters, you will enter that value and it will actually convert it to inches. So it's very cool and flexible, and that you don't have to really worry about it. So whatever you're comfortable with, we can work in millimeters, doesn't really matter. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that that option is there. Now again, let's go down and take another look at another option. Let's see Smart Guides. I do want to make sure that we say have our transform tools turned on. Smart Guides are incredibly powerful, and they've actually got slightly better in CS5, but really you'll understand these once we start using them. These aren't the same as normal guides that you drag in from rulers and use to position elements. These are really cool, and like I say, I'll show you them as we go along, but that's just an additional option I wanted to turn on there. Now, really, the most important one down here, I'm going to come down to the very last option, appearance of black, okay? Now, by default, this is specified so that on screen, all black colors are specified as rich black or display as rich black, and on print and export, say to a PDF file, they also output as rich black. Well, this is an example of what rich black versus 100% black are. If you were printing CMYK and you just entered 0 for cyan, magenta, and yellow, and you added 100% black, this is essentially what it looks like and prints like. It actually looks gray when you compare it to a solid or a rich black, or what I call a dense black, where you use 100% black and mix in some cyan, magenta, and yellow in order to add some density to it. Well, if we have these set to view everything as a rich black, if we fill something with 100% black, we won't know if it's actually going to be printing like this, which is really what we'd want. If we have large, dense areas, we want them to look like this. So in my preference, this really isn't the way it should be, and I'm going to show you an example of this. Let's make sure we click OK so that any of the changes we've made into the preferences are now stored. But in our documents here in the background, let's switch over to our business cards one, okay? Now, again, you might have them in a slightly different order here, but this is the one we're going to open. And you'll see these two black elements here in the center. These are basically the fronts of our business cards, and there are two designs here. And they both look like they have the same black in the background, okay? Well, let's pull up the Preferences dialog box again, Command-K, Control-K on the PC. Come over here and drop down to the Appearance of Black option, and I'm going to change both of these. On screen, I wish to display the blacks accurately. Printing and exporting, I also wish to do the same. Now when we say OK, you can see a shift in the color. This left-hand one has got a slight gray to it. The right-hand one is looking very rich, okay? Well, that's because I've got two colors in here. If you look in the color swatches over here on the right-hand side, you can see there is a dense black swatch. I'll show you how to create these later on. But that's what's viewing here on the right. The left-hand one was accidentally filled with 100% black. If we sent these files to print and our preferences weren't set correctly, we wouldn't know. And the left-hand card would come back looking very washed out and very gray. So, simple little thing, but I really wanted to point that out because I find that very, very important when we're specifying good, solid colors for print as CMYK.